Hello, welcome. My name is Jon Laven. I'm the co-founder of Snorkl and super excited that you are joining us here for our Snorkl 101 webinar. We're going to share a little bit of the ins and outs of Snorkl and how to get started in the platform. And especially if you're brand new, I want to make sure I can share with you some ways that you can bring Snorkl into your classroom immediately and get started with your students. So great to have you here. If you are able to drop something into the chat, if you're joining live right now, if you want to just drop maybe where you're coming from and what you teach into the chat, would love to be able to see that and give some shout outs to the folks who are here. All right, New York, New Jersey, great to have you here. If you are also joining and you've used Snorkl before, drop a quick note in the chat. We'd love to hear about how you've used the platform in your class as well. Washington, all right, math and science. Nova Scotia, Illinois, San Antonio, California, West Michigan, California, Texas. So great to have you all here. Like I said, my name is Jon. I'm one of the co-founders of Snorkl, and I am a high school math teacher by trade. That's what I did for 10 years. I was in the classroom, and I was an instructional coach, and really came to Snorkl from my own background in the classroom and seeing how much rich student thinking my students had and wanting ways to capture that and celebrate that. And so we built Snorkl as a tool to capture and celebrate student thinking, to give students really immediate and personalized feedback on their thinking, and give teachers rich insights into how all their students in their class are thinking. And so in this session here, I want to share with you some different ways that teachers are using Snorkl in their classrooms right now to hopefully give you some ideas of how the platform works. I want to talk a little bit about the impact of what happens when Snorkl is active in the classroom. I was just in some schools outside of Philadelphia this past week, which was a tremendous privilege, and got to talk to a bunch of elementary schoolers, middle schoolers, and high schoolers about how they were using Snorkl in their class. And then I'll share a little bit about how you as a teacher can get in there, create your account, and get started. And so super excited to dive in. Our homepage is snorkl.app. It looks like what you see right up here on the screen. And if you've never visited there before, I invite you to do so either right now or later on after the call this afternoon or this evening. In the top right-hand corner, there's a sign up button, and teachers can go in there. You can sign up and you can create a free account, and you can get started in Snorkl right away. On that teacher homepage, you're going to see a few different options across the top. Right up there on the left, the big button, try a sample activity. I love to encourage teachers to start there. If you've never used Snorkl before, it's a great place to start. There's a few sample activities across different contents and grade levels so that you can try it out and get a sense for what the platform can do yourself. Right next to that is the Find an Activity button. That will bring you to the Snorkl library, which I'll show you a little bit more of later. I'm also going to preview for you, give you a sneak preview of some of the things that are coming up soon in the Snorkl library, which I'm really excited to share. And then the third button there on the right is how to create an activity, and we'll walk through that today as well. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about why Snorkl. During the pandemic, we saw a lot of teachers who were using different tools to have students record their thinking. And it was challenging to really understand how students were thinking about problem solving or responding to questions at home. And so we thought this was really interesting. Having students explain and record their thinking provided a lot of really rich artifacts of student thinking and work, but it also created a tremendous challenge, obviously, as a teacher. If you had 100 students as a secondary teacher, or even with 25 students, that can be a lot of student work to have to look through and watch through. And we also found that just having students articulate their thoughts seemed like a really powerful experience for students. Students had a tendency to catch their own mistakes when they're articulating their thoughts. They have a tendency to have an opportunity to grapple with a little bit deeper conceptually when articulating their thoughts. And so we thought there was a really rich opportunity to have students record, and then with the powerful AI tools that are becoming available, give them really personalized, immediate feedback. And so what that looks like, if you've never seen a Snorkl activity before, this is just a sample activity. This is a sample math activity here, elementary school math. I'm going to show you a couple other sample activities in just a moment for science, for social studies, for ELA, for world languages. There are lots of different ways that you can use Snorkl. But this is what it looks like. Students open up their question from their teacher and they see it on a digital whiteboard where they've got different tools where they can make a response. So students can draw, they can highlight, they can type out text. And then what makes Snorkl really unique is we encourage students to actually explain their thinking. We want to get deeper into how students are thinking and reasoning. And so when they're ready, they press this purple record button and Snorkl records their voice and it will record what they're doing on their screen. And so I'm going to make a quick video here just to show you what happens when I do that. So I'm going to press record and now it's recording me. It says Lee had 6 feet of blue ribbon and some red ribbon. She had 9 feet altogether. Then she bought 2 more feet of red ribbon. How many feet of red ribbon does she have now? So I'm going to think through this. She's got 6 feet of blue ribbon and some unknown quantity of red ribbon. So I'm going to put unknown here for the red ribbon. And then she had 9 feet altogether. So all that added up to 9. How many feet of red ribbon? Oh, then she bought 2 more feet of red ribbon. So she's got an extra 2 feet of red ribbon. How many feet of red ribbon does she have now? Well, I know that if she had 6 feet of blue ribbon and 9 feet altogether, 9 minus 6 must have meant she had 3 feet of red ribbon right there. And so now how many feet of red ribbon does she have altogether? She had 3 plus 2 more. Lee must have 5 feet of red ribbon. All right, so I record, I explain and talk through my thinking process. And then when I press that submit button, what happens is the AI will begin to analyze both what I said and what I showed on the whiteboard in order to give me feedback and celebrate my response. Our goal with feedback is always to give feedback in the way that a great teacher will give feedback. We're going to try to encourage the students on the things that are going right. And then if students are making a mistake or going wrong, we're going to give them specific questions around areas of improvement. Students also get a score on a 0 through 4 scale for their response. So they immediately get that personalized feedback and score and gives teachers immediate insights into how the students did as well. So if you check out my feedback that I got here on the right-hand side, I got that correct. I got a 4 out of 4 for an excellent response. And then I get some specific pieces of praise and feedback on my explanation. As a student, students can listen to that feedback right aloud to them. They can use that feedback right away to respond again if they got something critical or questions or something that they could improve. And so students can try again. And this is one of the things that we hear from teachers all the time is how often their students are trying again, even sometimes without even being asked. And I think that speaks to both the immediacy and personalization of the feedback. That's pretty unique and pretty powerful. When teachers set up Snorkl activities, you have a lot of control and power, and I'm going to show you how you can do this on your own in just a moment to actually customize what the AI is looking for in that student response. So this is not just student work going into this black box of AI and coming back with feedback. You as the teacher can actually set your learning goals and targets. You can tell the AI to look for certain vocabulary or certain strategies that you want to hear. And so you can really hone this in on your learning goals and your learning targets. On the teacher side, then you get to see all these really awesome artifacts of student work. And so across the class, you'll instantly see that student work pop up with a score of how well they did. If you take your cursor, you can actually quickly preview over how the student responded, and you can jump into that individual student response. Right. If a student, this is a great example of a student who got the right answer, but didn't really give an explanation. And so you see my explanation score here is low. And we want students to articulate, explain, share their thinking and reasoning so that they can keep improving. I'm going to jump right now to the Insights tab here, right next to the responses across the top. As the teacher, I know that each of my students are now getting personalized feedback. I also want to know not just my students' scores, but what are the gaps? Where can I support students and who's doing well? And so I'm going to click on the Insights tab here, and you'll see across the top, it will show me some of my top exemplars from across the class. And then it'll also show me some of the trending misconceptions from across the class. And so instantly, Snorkl is helping teachers to identify small groups and what errors are existing, and so where they can jump in and support. This was a math example. I want to switch context just a little bit here to show different ways that Snorkl can be used. And so I'm going to pull up here. Where's my social studies? Here's a fun social studies question, right? So you could have students analyze a passage or annotate a passage, respond to questions about the text. You could have them answer open-ended questions or even reflection questions. Because when you set up that assignment or activity, you can actually define the criteria for success. There's really no limit to the type of questions that you can put into Snorkl. That is a social studies question. Here's a short reading passage that students might annotate. They can use the highlighter tools and annotate and respond to. You could have students answer questions about a cell or an experiment. There's no end to what you can do. So those are the basics of Snorkl. And I think one of the things that was most powerful in the classroom visits that I had this past week was the number of students who talked about how they felt like they were immediately supported by that feedback, and the number of students who really felt motivated to try again. And I think what we've found is there is something really special about Snorkl inviting student voice into the classroom, right? We're getting our students to talk and explain more. And when students are talking and explaining, they feel greater ownership of their work. I think this is really natural, right? If I put my answer down on a piece of paper and slide it across my desk to my teacher, I might not feel super connected to what score I get back the next day. But if I get immediate feedback on my explanation, what I just said and articulated, that's pretty meaningful. And so we see all the time that students are really invested in keep improving and keep trying in Snorkl. Have any of you experienced that in your class? I know a few people said in the chat that they have already tried out Snorkl and seen students improve. I'm going to just take a quick peek here at the chat. Yeah, that they can, thanks Stormy, yeah, that they can reuse their response and they can refine it. Yeah, when students retry, they can actually pick up on their previous work as well. A 27-minute response is a very long response. We don't typically see that. Snorkl actually typically cuts off about after 10 minutes. So we advise keeping responses under 10 minutes. The average Snorkl response, just so you know, is somewhere around 60 seconds. So it's typically not that intensive, but great questions. Yeah, some great questions coming in here. The chat about customizing those activities and multiple questions. I'm going to address those as we jump more into how you can set up and create your own activities as well. And if I miss anything, I'm going to make sure that we come back to those as we go ahead. So in the Snorkl platform, right at the middle here, you'll find the Snorkl library. If you've never checked this out before, we have an awesome and always growing content library. This week, there's a whole bunch of new additional Algebra 1 content going out, chemistry content going out. There is grade 2 ELA content going out. There's calculus content going out. And so there's a bunch of new additions in here if you haven't been in here recently. Anything that's in the Snorkl library, you can try as a student, or you can assign immediately to your class. We love to encourage folks to try it out, get that experience yourself. And you can always customize even the things that are in the library to more closely match your learning goals and targets. I also love to point out, if you scroll down a little bit here in the general section, there are some getting started activities. And these are just some really fun ways to get started with Snorkl. So if you want to start a good fight in your classroom, shout out to Dan Meyer, if you're familiar with him, always encouraging starting a fight in the classroom. Ask students about whether they'd rather use a spoon or a fork to eat mac and cheese as a fun, lighthearted way to get into snorkeling. And then maybe later you dive into how to solve a multivariable calculus question or whatever the topic is at hand. So those are available to you in the Snorkl library. And the Snorkl library, one of the exciting updates I'm excited to share with you is this spring is getting a really big update. You're gonna be able to search across contents and grade levels in the Snorkl library. You'll be able to search items by standard in the Snorkl library. We're adding social studies content to the Snorkl library. So some really great updates coming to the Snorkl library really soon. We can go back to that Snorkl homepage, and I want to walk through and talk through the process of creating an assignment. And I'm going to address some of the questions that came up in the chat here around student feedback language, about assigning multiple activities, and some other sort of custom features that I want to be sure to share with you, as well as how you can share Snorkl activities with your colleagues or peers. So if you've never created a Snorkl activity before, we try to make it pretty simple to do. This right-hand side button, create an activity, will bring you to that edit activity page. I'm going to call this a new activity, and I'm going to add content to the whiteboard. And so you can type a question on this whiteboard, you can copy and paste something from your clipboard onto this whiteboard, or you can even drag and drop something if you've got a PNG or a JPEG file snapshot of maybe even from your curriculum that you want to just copy and paste onto that whiteboard. You can paste it there. You can't upload a whole PDF to the Snorkl whiteboard. And the reason for that is a PDF provides just a lot of content for the AI to try to digest. It also, we have found, provides a lot of content for students to respond to. We don't recommend putting 10 questions on a Snorkl whiteboard. That's a quite demanding task for students to respond to 10 questions on a Snorkl whiteboard. But we encourage 1 or 2 oftentimes because we see that allows students really to get into depth with their thinking. And Snorkl is a tool really built around this idea of going deep in student thinking. There are some ways that you can assign multiple activities at once, and I'll share that in a minute, and work on some updates to also allow those to be grouped in the future. But let me just walk through this basic process first. So you add content to that whiteboard, you click that Done Editing button, and when you scroll down, there's a big purple Generate from Question button. And this is the AI setting up the feedback. So you press that purple button, and what happens is the AI will analyze what you just put on the whiteboard, and it will develop for you an answer key or criteria for success. And we show this to you as the teacher so that you can double check it, and so that you can make sure that it aligns with your learning goals and learning targets. So I just put that physics question here on the whiteboard. The AI has identified this as a high school science question. It gives me the text that was on the whiteboard, and it even gives a description of that image that I put on the whiteboard. Down below is an answer key that the AI has just developed for this question, step by step, walking through how a student would solve this question. You'll notice there's an edit button here. So if I press this edit button, I can make adjustments to anything about how this assignment is set up. I can change the subject area, the grade level, I can change the prompt or the answer and criteria. We encourage folks to always double check the answer and criteria. The AI is quite strong, but this is what the AI is going to use to guide how it gives your students feedback. And so if the answer key or criteria for whatever reason isn't quite right, you'll want to make sure that you can check that. And especially if you're asking something open-ended, you want to adjust that to your learning goals, right? If we didn't talk about the causes of the Revolutionary War, including, unjust representation, then I might want to remove that from the criteria for success for that assignment. And so there's a lot of options here to customize that to the goals. Once that activity is set up, you hit confirm, and then you can hit that assign button and assign it to your class. When you assign a Snorkl activity, a share code or a link is automatically generated, and you can share that with your students. Students can get in and start snorkeling. So it's really simple to get started. Students do sign into Snorkl with a Google or a Microsoft account, and that's part of how we keep students' accounts safe and secure. You'll notice when I went through that activity setup process, there is an option to toggle on guest login. That only needs to be toggled on if you don't want students to authenticate with Microsoft or Google. Then they would sign in anonymously or they put in their names. But there are some disadvantages to doing that. You'll lose the access to see their progress over time, and they won't be able to come back and revisit their work in the same way. Snorkl saves students' work over time so they can come back, they actually can build a portfolio, a collection of their work. And as a teacher, there's the progress view where it's sort of like a gradebook view. You can actually see student progress across multiple activities over time to get some really rich data on student learning. Those are the basics of setting up and sharing a Snorkel activity with your students. Again, that share button is in the top right-hand corner. And right underneath that is the try as a student button. That's where you can actually try that activity out yourself and create that recording, get that feedback, and experience the Snorkel activity yourself before sharing it with your students. So those are the basics of creating a Snorkel activity. Now let's get to some of the more advanced things, or things people were asking about here in the chat just a minute ago. The first is language. Snorkel allows students to share their thinking in over 40 different languages, right? We really want to celebrate all that our students are bringing to the classroom, regardless of what language that's in. And so when setting up a Snorkel activity, there's nothing that you need to do that's different in order for students to get that feedback in a different language on your end as a teacher. On the student end, on the top right-hand corner of their account, and this is the same on teacher accounts, you'll see there's a language settings option. If you go to language settings, that's where you can choose from any one of those 40 different languages and select the language of feedback. I have an example pulled up here, which I will find. This is a student who selected to receive their feedback in Spanish. And so you'll see the feedback that there on the right-hand side is in Spanish. As the teacher, I have this little translate button. And so I can press that button, and now that feedback is translated back to English for me so that I can understand the feedback that my students got. If they also recorded in Spanish, there would be a translate button down here for their transcript. So I can also see their transcript in English. So a lot of access there to understand students who are perhaps new to country or developing their English language proficiency. I was talking to a teacher in San Diego the other day. He had a brand new to country student come into his classroom. She was from Mexico. It was her first day there. She didn't know hardly any English. They were doing a Snorkel activity in math, and she got on and she recorded in Spanish. And she was the first student in the class to get a 4 out of 4. And the way the teacher described it, those students' eyes, her classmates' eyes lit up. They could not believe that the student who maybe they weren't so sure about just a moment ago just was the first one in the class to get a 4. It really allowed her to shine and celebrate what she knew and was able to share. Another common question we get is, can students have the content that's on the whiteboard translated to their preferred language? The answer to that is also yes. Anything that's in the instructions box, so the box right underneath the whiteboard there, can be translated automatically and actually read aloud for the student. So what that looks like here on the student end is in the instructions box is in the top right-hand corner. And there you can see it's in English right now. I have my account set on English, so it doesn't give me the translate option. But if a student's account is set on a different language, they can translate it to that different language, and they can also have it read aloud. There was also a question in the chat a moment ago about how do you assign multiple activities? Like I mentioned before, Snorkel is really a tool about depth over breadth. And so we have a lot of teachers who will oftentimes assign 1, 2, or maybe 3 Snorkel activities at a time. But what you can do from the Snorkel library, from the My Library, is you can select multiple activities and you can assign them all at once. And you can even assign them to multiple classes at once. And so that will allow you to quickly share multiple activities to all your students. You do not need to share the unique link or join code to every single one of those activities. When students sign in with their Google or their Microsoft account, they'll be able to see all of their activities that their teachers have assigned them. They'll see which ones they've already completed and what their best score on that was and which ones they haven't done yet. And so it's pretty easy on the student side to navigate between those activities and find what they're working on. It's a popular request to be able to add like group activities. And so we are thinking through the best ways to do that in the future, and we're excited for those updates as well. I talked a little bit about the language features for supporting new to country students and English language learners. What I didn't talk too much about yet is world language classes. We have a lot of world language classes where teachers are using Snorkel, not just to explain, but to explain in the language that they're practicing, right? Really rich oral options for assignments. And so when an activity is set up as a world language activity, students are required to speak in that language that the activity is set up for. And at the teacher's discretion, you can even toggle it so that the whole class receives feedback for that in that language as well. And so you can create really rich language tasks here, more than just how do you say these words, but like give an introduction of yourself, or explain. In this question here, it's like explain how Miguel is related to those other people in his family. And so you same experience, press that record button, speak your thinking out loud, submit, and get that feedback. I want to pause here, make sure I get a chance to look at the chat. Oh yeah, great question about scoring. So as a teacher, you have a lot of control over what the AI is looking for in that student response, and you can adjust that all through the expected answer. Currently, all activities in Snorkl are scored on the same scale, on a 0 through 4 scale. And so you cannot currently adjust that scale score. It's always 0 through 4. But within that scale score, you can give the AI criteria that you're looking for. You can say a 4 should be this, a 3 should be this, a 2 should be this, a 1 should be this. Great question. Okay, there's a great question here about the grade level, and how to get it to maybe perhaps address a different grade level. Let's say you put a question to Snorkl, you press that generate from question button, the AI generates it, and it comes out with a high school level answer, and you wanted it to generate an elementary school level answer. There's a little hack or a little workaround for this. When the AI generates that, what it's doing is it's looking at the whiteboard to generate that expected answer. And so if you open up that whiteboard and you type, this is a fourth grade question on that whiteboard, and then go back down, click that purple generate from question button, the AI should see that, should use that to guide, or you could even put it in the instructions box. You don't have to put it on the whiteboard. You should use that to help guide how it creates your criteria for success. And then you can just go back up and delete that sentence or remove it from the instructions if you want, or the whiteboard if you want. So that's a little trick. I think it's something that's we're working on how to make that even stronger and better over time. But that's definitely something that we've seen people do to sort of customize or hone in on that level piece. If you've got other questions, I invite you to drop them here in the chat. I'm happy to answer them and happy to support you. I want to make sure that I share, if you've created Snorkl activities, one of the awesome things about Snorkl is that you can actually share those activities with your colleagues, and they can use the same activity for their classroom. So if you go to the library and then the My Library, here you'll see are all the different activities that I've created. And there's 3 little dots right here that say share with teachers. And that will give me a link that I can then copy and share to my colleagues, and they can use the same Snorkl activity. Later this spring, for our premium users, we are adding school and district libraries, which we're really excited about. We'll also be adding folders so that you can organize and share, your exit tickets for each unit, or however you want to group them, or however you're using Snorkl. Just pausing here to go back for the chat. Paulo, great question around the whiteboard. The whiteboard just does a little refresh there after a student submits there. So it will sometimes go blank for a couple seconds, but it should pop back up. Yeah, shout out to the Edu protocols. There are a couple of Edu protocol templates actually now in the Snorkl library. If you go into the Snorkl library in general, there's some examples in there and some pre-created templates that you can dive in to use if you're familiar with Edu protocols. Awesome. Like I said at the beginning, if you haven't created a Snorkel account yet, you can create one at snorkel.app. You can dive in there, get started. Everything that I just showed you is all part of that free teacher version that you can use. One thing I'll just quickly name and preview. I know there's some people here who already have school accounts or premium accounts with their district. If that's you, you also have access to what we call Snorkl Coach. And Snorkl Coach is enabled on an assignment. What it means is that your students have access to an extra tool, that's an AI tool that can actually see students' whiteboards. They can interact with it and ask it questions. It can support and coach them in their thinking process even before they submit their recording. And so we've got a lot of teachers who use Snorkel in a lot of different ways. If you're using it as a formative assessment, you might toggle that off. But if you're allowing students to explore a new question or problem in Snorkel, you can turn that Snorkl Coach tool on. You can actually, I've seen teachers use this in writing class where they have students write something on their whiteboard and then actually interact with Snorkl Coach and have a live chat conversation about their writing, make revisions, and then when they're ready, you close Snorkl Coach and you press that submit button and submit your work. So that's one of the features that's available on those premium accounts. A couple of other features around still responses on the whiteboards and things like that. But most of the basics here of everything I shared here around student recording, student voice is all available to everyone. Super grateful to have you joining us here this afternoon or this evening, depending on what coast you're on. And thanks so much for the questions that you dropped in the chat. My name again is Jon Laven, and I'll put my contact information back up here on the screen. So if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out at any time, and we're happy to support you. It's john@snorkl.app, or you can email us at support@snorkl.app. And really excited for you to dive in there and get snorkeling. Thanks so much. Enjoy.